It's good to be with everybody. I am the elected prosecuting attorney of Platte County, Missouri. Platte County is one of four counties that has residents of Kansas City, Missouri in it. I also stretch up into further north Missouri and have some very rural jurisdictions as well as other suburban jurisdictions as well. Part of what I've been thinking about during this sort of now as the pandemic winds down is how can we re-envision and re-engage with the public, re-envision what we do, and re-engage with all of the partners that we deal with. So I guess if we drop back 15 or 16 months, I wonder how many of you felt like this. I know sometimes I certainly did as we transitioned very quickly from work in the office to work at home. Because if you're anything like me, prior to the pandemic, I worked very rarely from home. And I didn't even allow my assistant prosecutors or staff really to even ask to work from home. I had a few requests over my 18 years as the elected prosecutor, but I always really summarily denied those requests without even thinking about it. Just basically saying, "Look, we're prosecutors and prosecutor staff. We work from the office. This is how we know how to do it. This is the better way to do it." And I didn't even really think about allowing people to work from home. But that was forced on us because of the pandemic. Now I think we know that we can work from home, but then the question is, should we? And do we have to? And if so, when do we do that? I will tell you that as the pandemic began to conclude, I surveyed my staff and asked them whether they wanted to retain some work from home. And ultimately, we decided to allow both prosecutors and our non-prosecutorial support staff to design individual plans if they wanted to work up to 2 days from home. I still decided that we wanted them to be in the office the majority of the time, but we're allowing folks who want to work 2 days from home. So let's talk about some things that might be better done from home. We've already talked about remote court proceedings, and for reasons already described, it might be that those are better handled sometimes from home, if for no other reason than that bandwidth can often be better from home than when you've got dozens of prosecutors and defense attorneys and judges and court reporters clogging up the bandwidth in a single courthouse site. Reviewing and charging cases might be better done from home if you've got good access to files. And we'll talk more here in a second about paperless office solutions and the importance of those, I think, to making working from home work well. But it could be that reviewing cases can go just as well, if not better, from home. Drafting things like motions or appeals, if your office does those things, can be, again, probably just as well done at home as it can from the office, as long as you've got access to the things that you need to do that. And virtual trainings or office meetings, these trainings, whether they're in the office or outside the office, can be done just like we're doing this one, without travel, hopefully without distractions. They're easy to record, just like we're doing with this portion of this meeting. So there are some advantages to doing trainings and meetings virtually, and those things can be done almost as easily from home as they can from the office. And then preparing witnesses remotely can be done well from home, just as it can from the office. Again, oftentimes, I think we're going to want to get back to where we are preparing witnesses face to face, at least those lay witnesses who we don't see very often. Again, as we pointed out before, Daisy mentions it's a lot easier to judge your witnesses and to work with them if you're face to face than doing it remotely. But there are some witnesses that it may just be as easy to prepare remotely. That might be done just as easily from home. Now, this list that I put in front of you is a list that really applies to attorneys, but I think we could all think about similar things that our non-attorney support staff could also do from home. So let's talk some about the benefits of working from home. I think some of our current employees have grown to enjoy it. It may be improving morale some to have folks work a portion of the time from home. Again, we felt like we were missing some things from working remotely too, and I'll talk about that here when I get to my next slide. But a mixture of work from home and work from the office is something that I think we've found many employees want. It may also be that our as yet unhired employees may expect it. The private sector is doing a lot of work from home. We all know that we as public attorneys compete with the private sector as we're trying to hire both our attorney and our non-attorney staff. And if the private sector is going to allow much more work from home, which I think they are, we may have to do that just to remain competitive with our private sector employers. Um, it could be that working from home, at least partly, increases productivity for some things. I've mentioned some things where fewer distractions may help us be more productive when you're writing those motions or drafting other documents. All of us, depending on the metro area you live in, lose at least some time in our commute back and forth to work. If you live in a large metropolitan area, you might lose a lot of time during that commute back and forth to work, particularly if it's not just at the beginning and the end of a day. If you've got something in the middle of the day, a child's performance that you want to go to at their school or something like that, frankly, it may be that that child's school is closer to your home. You may lose less time working from home that day than driving a long way to an office, back to an event, and then back to the office. It's also true when there are things that you have to be home for, but you could still get some work done. I can remember when my children were younger, and one of them would get sick. Either my wife or I would have to take the entire day off, and we just took it as a sick day. I might try to do some work from home, but I wasn't really set up to do it. Once we're set up to work from home, I could have been very productive many of those days when I had a child who I needed to look in on occasionally, but often that kid was in bed sleeping most of the day, and I could have been very productive from home in ways that at the time I wasn't. Now, I think there are some disadvantages to working from home as well, and we've probably all experienced this during the pandemic. We do just have less of the water cooler talk that in many ways is a positive thing for our office. Some of that is very, very helpful just to getting people engaged in the office, to find colleagues who they also call friends. Those are important things that we've missed during the pandemic. We also lose the collaboration. I tell people all the time that we as prosecutors make more important decisions that are forever going to affect people's lives in one day than most normal people make in their entire lives. And we do a better job of that when we're working together, thinking about these problems that we never have enough information to really solve if we're thinking about them together. That's harder to do when we're working remotely. And then there's also less mentoring for our younger employees. There's a real issue. We hired some new staff in the middle of the pandemic, and orienting those new folks to our vision and values was substantially more difficult when they were working from home. Some of the things that just happen organically when you're in the office couldn't happen as we were working from home. It's also much more difficult for supervisors to actually supervise their employees. It's hard to provide ongoing guidance. A younger attorney can't just walk into a supervisor's office next door and say, "Hey, how should I handle this thing?" Instead, they've got to either pick up a phone or jump on a Zoom like this. And I'm just not sure that additional layer of complexity means that it happens all the time. It's also sometimes difficult to know whether or not employees are actually doing their work from home. There are ways that we can measure productivity from home. And the private sector in many jobs has done a very, very good job of doing that, but it's tough. In addition, these sorts of virtual meetings that we're doing right now are, I think, tremendous in many ways, but they also have their limitations. There's less interaction. It's harder for me even now to gauge how you all are reacting to this. Whereas if we were in one room together, it'd be easier for me to see your body language, to see whether I was engaging you with these ideas. You get fewer questions on a Zoom than you get in a room where somebody can just actually raise their hand rather than virtually raising their hand. We also get, I think we all are prone to doing a lot more multitasking during a Zoom meeting than we are an in-person meeting. I'll see folks occasionally look at their cell phones while we're in the middle of a meeting in my office, but I suspect it's happening a whole lot more, and they're also doing other things on their computers when we're on Zoom meetings. And then, of course, we've all had the technical issues that, as Shannon demonstrated to us in her very first slide, that one attorney had when he made himself a cat during a very important hearing. Those technical issues sometimes can make virtual meetings a little bit more difficult. So, let's talk now about how to let's see.
Sorry to interrupt. There's about 5 minutes left.
Good. Yeah, let's talk about creating a work from home policy. If you're interested in doing this, I think some of the things that we have to think about are how often can an employee work from home? And must those employees be available to come to the office, even if they're scheduled that day to work from home? Are there things that can't be done from home? I will tell you that here in the Kansas City area, there's an FBI agent who is now being prosecuted for having taken documents out of the FBI headquarters home. I suspect she was doing other things with those documents than just taking those sensitive files out of the office. I wonder if there was concern about espionage and counter-espionage happening there, but she's only being prosecuted for taking sensitive documents from the office. Are there things that we don't want employees to do from home because either they're too difficult to do or they're too sensitive to do from home? We need to think about how we're going to supervise work from home as well. And then the most important thing, not only to avoid potential lawsuits and liability, but just to be the sorts of fair bosses that we want to be, is how do we treat similar employees similarly when we're dealing with work from home? Because I think some of the things that make employees similar and dissimilar for a work from home situation aren't the sorts of things we have to consider when we're working in the office. For example, do those employees have kids? I can tell you I've got kids who are college age now, and so working home during the pandemic wasn't particularly difficult for me. I can tell you, had that happened 15 years earlier, it would have been an entirely different situation in my home, working with children from home. So age considerations and whether or not employees have kids are going to affect whether those employees want to work from home and how productive they can be from home. We also know that for whatever reason, some employees are just demonstrably better able to work from home as opposed to others. How do we consider that as we track what folks are doing from home? And then supervisors and subordinates are in different positions when it comes to working from home as well. And whether or not you're going to allow some supervisors and some subordinates to work from home is something I think you've got to think through when you're creating that policy. Finally, all of this is much easier to do in a paperless office. You see all the things that we need to think about in creating that paperless office. Some of us, like my office, have been fortunate to have done that pre-pandemic. I think many of us are going to be thinking about it in the future who haven't. But I will tell you, it's not a really easy thing to accomplish. You have older attorneys who want those paper files, but also just getting the funding for it, finding the time for staff to implement it, scanning your old documents into a paperless file structure, if you want to do it, I will tell you, in our office was a significant task. Just training folks on how your case management system is going to work for doing all of that. It's not an easy thing to do, although I will tell you, at least in our office, we believe that the effort, which we did years ago, was very much worth it, and thankfully set us up when we were forced to work from home to do that at a much more productive level. So I'll leave you with this. And after you've had a chance to read this, I will just note that I am doing this presentation with my pants on, and I hope all of you are attending with your pants on as well.